Okay. I don't know everybody's name in the class, so I apologize. But if you're looking at your screen instead of tuning into lecture, you are susceptible to being called upon to answer these questions. I'll start with Mikey. Or are you going to turn your screen sideways? Mikey? Okay. What's the difference between M and RIM? Don't know. All right. Gray sweater, glasses. What's your name? Oh, okay. You're exempt. You're not in my class.
Don't worry about it.
What's the difference, blue visor, between absolute and relative units of measurement?
I'll tell you just a moment.
Oh, it's all right. Don't go look it up.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So, no, it's cool. The point being, focus in. Let's hang out. Let's talk about this stuff because you'll get good stuff out of it. So I don't know what other work you might be doing, but heads up, some people may lose access. You moved this and 2 other items out of the shared folder. Temporary recordings, which may result in people losing access. When did I do that? Okay. So units of measurement. M's, RIMs, percent, VH, VW, my favorite, because you can now say, I got 2 VWs. I want my font size to be 2 VWs. Or pretty soon you'll be able to say that. Still not completely available in all browsers. It's got about 80%. But if we look at MDN length, and if we look at MDN percent, and if we look at MDN font size, we can start to learn about some of these different units of measurement. MDN percentage, yeah, that's it. And MDN length. Interestingly, length is a data type. That's kind of interesting they call it a data type. Because from programming, I think about data types like an int, a string, a bool, a slice, array. But they call it a data type. So you're taking some value, 100, and you're making it a certain type. It's a percent. It's a pixel. It's an M. It's a RIM. So you're making it a certain type. That's cool. And many CSS properties take length values. And you could do negative lengths. And then it divides lengths into relative and absolute. So relative lengths are going to be relative to something else on the page. So some of them will be relative to their parent. Some of them will be relative to the root, which is like just the base fundamental size that a browser shows. Right? So that's relative. And for relative, you've got M, X, CH, RIM, right? Unless somebody advises me else otherwise, or until somebody advises me otherwise, I'm just going to teach you M and RIM. Because I've never really seen X used, I've never really seen CH used. Anybody in here? Alan, I'm speaking to you. Or Rio, you seen X or CH used? Yeah, me either. So M and RIM. So M is relative to its parent, and RIM is relative to the root, which is what the R stands for. So that's the default font size of the browser. So that's relative. We're just going to do a little bit of a preview. Also relative is VH, VW, VMin, and VMax. Those are also relative. And they're relative to the viewport. So I could say, hey, 100 VW. And my width is 100 VW. So that's going to be 100 all the way across the viewport. Not unlike 100%, right? My width is 100%. But VW doesn't have as much VH, right? When we look at can I use, VW, 80% of browsers recognize that. That's not really high enough for me. I would like 95, 96%, because I could write off that 5% as just being a bunch of hillbillies who don't have money anyhow. Or government employees, but, you know, because government notoriously is still using IE8. Much like the computers in our office. Many of the computers in our offices are really sad. Some people are hoping to get the Pentium 2 upgrade. But you can see, you know, which ones do and which ones don't. Speaking of which, little bit of a tangent. We talked about browsers and layout rendering engines last week. So WebKit, which ones use WebKit? Yeah, and Opera. Which ones use Trident? Or which one uses Trident? IE. Which one uses Gecko? Firefox. Which one uses Edge? Edge. It's like the Edge layout rendering engine is what they call it. Just kind of interesting because sometimes you'll see here only Gecko-based browsers, right, are updating based upon changes. So those are relative units, MRIM, and then keep your eye on VHVW. And then we have absolute units, and absolute units are like pixels. And then we also have millimeter, centimeter, inch, point, pica, however you say it, right? Pica, tomato. And out of all those, just use pixel. So pixel, MRIM, that's it, right? M and RIM are relative, and pixel is absolute. Relative means it's relative to a parent or relative to the root. RIM is relative to the root. You'll see that in action. Where's percentage? I do a Command F on this page. There's no percentage. 0, 0. Heck, I thought that would be on here. Well, percentage is its own deal. It's a percentage data type. I don't know why it wouldn't be under the, length was like length data type. I guess it's, and then we have length units, but percentage is its own data type. And define sizes in terms of parent object. So is it relative or absolute? Relative. Now the difference between M and RIM and percent, M and RIM are always going to reference font size of either the parent or the root. Percent is somewhat contextual. So if we do percent on font, right? So we have a container, parent element, and we say, hey, font size is 50% or 200%. The parent container is 18 pixels. So there's 18 pixels. And then we say font size 50%. There's 50% printed out. 50% of what? 50% of the parent font size, right? Or 200% of the parent font size. So this would be 9 pixels. This would be 36 pixels. 36 pixels, 9 pixels. If this was 12 pixels, the parent container is 12 pixels, and I said font size 200%, what size would this be? If this one was 12, what size in pixels would this be? 24, thank you. Just checking. But the percent is somewhat contextual. So here we say width is 50%, right? 50% of the font, my parent's font? No, 50% of your parent's width, right? Interesting, it's somewhat contextual. Based upon its context, it does things slightly different. And so here, the outer container is the blue one, and this green div, we say 50% width. Well, the width of that is 50% of the blue one's width. Or the red one, the width of that is 30% of the blue one's width, right? So percent is contextual to its parent. Whereas M and RIM always references font of the parent or the root. Interesting. And then you can see in font size some examples. You will sometimes see keywords used to set font size. But 12 pix, 0.8 em, font size 80%, right? So let me show you something. If you go into settings, we've talked about this before and I've never actually found it or brought it up, and then go to advanced settings, and then come down here to customize fonts, you can see here's like the default font size stuff of my browser. 16, 16, 16. So that's pretty much default font size for browsers, 16. Just FYI. So 16 times 0.625 is equal to 10. So sometimes you will see this. Body font size, 62.5%. So it's 62.5% of the browser's default font. Right? And so if, let me just see if we have some HTML somewhere, but we don't. So if I then say, hey, another font down here is 1M, is 1 times whatever the parent is. M refers to the parent. And if the parent is 10, then it's 10 pixels. Or if I say 1.6 and the parent's 10, that's 16 pixels. It makes it easier math. Let's see that in action. So let's look at some code. So units of measurement. M is relative to the parent. Rem is relative to the root. Then some principles for using those. One of the articles I asked you to read. So here we have that HTML. What is the parent of the H2s? No. Parent of the H2s. Section is the parent. What is the parent of the section? Article. What is the parent of the H1? Article. What is the parent of the paragraph? Body. What is the parent of article? Body. What is the parent of body? HTML. Okay? So let's look at the CSS. So HTML font size 62.5%. So if my default font in my browser is 16, then 62.5% of 16 is 10 pixels. This would be the same as saying this. Okay, that'd be the same. Saying that. Is there any argument for saying that over saying this? Pluses and minuses to saying it this way versus saying it this way.
Did you use percentage in different browsers?
So somebody might have set their default font to be something other than 16. The disadvantage to using that in 62.5% then is that it might totally screw up my layout, right? Because now they have font size 32 because they're visually impaired. And so, 0.625 of 32 is 20, I think. And, yeah. And, then my fonts are all going to be too big. So it might screw up my layout. However, it'll be readable for them. Whereas if I have this, it won't screw up my layout, but it might not be readable for them. I'll probably go with this. It looks good, but you can't use it. Or this. You can use it, but it doesn't look good. Which do you want? I'm going to leave that. You could use it, but it doesn't look good. So the font size on the paragraph is 1M. And M's refer to the parent. So what is the pixels of my paragraph? In pixels, what size will my paragraph be? 10. Because the parent of the paragraph is the body. Body doesn't have a font set on it, so it's going to inherit the font size of its parent, which is HTML, the root. And the font size of the parent HTML root is 10 pixels, right? And so this becomes one of its parent, the body, its font size, and the parent's body font size is inherited from its parent, HTML, and that is 10. What about article? What's the font size going to be? 20. So H1s will be 20, because everything inside article is 2 times its parent. Its parent is body. Body doesn't have font size set. I know this is repetitious. So it looks to its parent, HTML, which does have font size, and inherits that, which is 10. 10 times 2 is 20. You see why it's good to kind of set this down to 10? Because it makes the math easier, right? If it's 16, you'd be like, and you wanted to get 20 pixels, you'd be like, what times 16 gives me 20? But here I just say 2 gives me 20. Otherwise, I'd have to say, like, I don't know, whatever math you do on that. 20 divided by 16 is going to give you 1.25. I did that earlier. And then section, what font size is section going to be? 20. Because its parent is 20. And give me 1 of my parent. Give me the same thing as my parent, 1M. Right? Because section's parent is article. Article's 20. Give me 1 of my parent, 20. So these are going to be 20 and 20, same size. And paragraph will be 10. There's 10, there's 20, there's 20. M's are relative to their parents.
Okay, you lost me. I got everything you said until you said that the second one was
20.
20.
Okay, because M's are relative to their parents.
Okay.
So what's the section's parent?
Section's parent
Is what?
2M, so 20.
No, but which element is the section's parent? So section's parent is what? Is it H1, article, paragraph, body, HTML? What's the parent of section? The immediate parent. Article. What's the font size of article?
The 1EM.
Article is 2M.
Oh, you just took a portion of it.
This is the CSS over here. Okay, so this is my rule set. Rule sets have a selector and declaration blocks. Has declarations. Yes, my style sheet. So the font size of the article is 20. That's the parent. And then here I'm saying on the section, give me 1 times my parent's font size. My parent's font size is 20. 1 times 20 is 20. So it's relative to the parent. I'm slow to explain stuff sometimes. I'm also slow to learn it sometimes. I was just telling Rio, it's like, I don't know if I'm remedial or not, because I'm just like out there learning this on my own. If I was in school, I could kind of look around and see, am I learning slower or faster than my peers? But like some of this stuff, it's just like, I'll bang my head against it all day and then come in here and talk to you about it. It sounds like I know what I'm doing, but it's because I've been reading about it all day. It took me all day to figure out that physical pixel, device independent pixel, CSS pixel, because there's like different words for it, and people just don't talk about it in logical ways. So here we have the same code, and we're going to start using rims. Rims are relative to the root. So what's the size of the article going to be? 20 pixels. What's the size of the section going to be? 20 pixels. Because the root element, the HTML element, is 10 pixels. Give me 2 times 10, 2 times 10. Well, hell, I'm just going to use rem. Screw m, right? And I'll always know like what the size of everything is. So is there any case where you want to use m? One of the articles I asked you to read as homework says yes, indeed there is. And so you're going to use rem for setting things globally and m for setting things within a component where you want it to be somewhat relative. And so let me just show you that in action, and then we'll look at the CSS. So there's some text, and there's some margin between the paragraphs. As I change the size on this, nothing happened. Let's put it that way right there. Let me change the size over here. That's what I wanted to do. So my paragraphs. So as I change my font size, go up to 40 pixels. That's 40 pixels for the font size. Here's 20 pixels. And you'll notice that the space between the paragraphs looks good either way, and I didn't have to touch it. Right? That's like basically 40 pixels between each paragraph. And that's 20 pixels between each paragraph. So use rims for global sizing and M's for local sizing. Rims scale something with the page, global sizing, and M's to scale within a component, local sizing. So here, my paragraph is looking for its margin. Hey, look to the parent's font size and set the margin relative to the parent's font size. The parent is containing, here's the parents containing 2 paragraphs. And each of those paragraphs right now are 20 pixels. And set the margin between them to 20 pixels. Look to my parent. You know, so if I didn't have that, I could have also just been like, to rim. Oh, I'm going to change it to 4 rim. Let me change this one. Let me change this one. Right? But it's easier just to be like that. And then that is always going to reflect whatever the parent is. M's look to the parent's font size. You're not in my class? Why are you leaving early? Just kidding. You understand rims versus M's now? How many people have clarity on M's versus rims? How many people, if I was asked you to explain the difference between M's and rims, you could do it? How many people could not?
I can do it, but I don't really understand it all together.
Somebody explain it. Let's hear it. Somebody. Tell me about M's and rims. That was one take. Somebody else give me a take on M's and rims. Huh? Rim is global. Yeah, good for setting things globally, and M's are better for setting things within a component. Somebody else tell me about rims and M's. Yes, M's are relative to the parent. Super important to know. And rims are relative to what? Your Impala. No, sorry. Your Impala, rims. To the root. Rims are relative to the root. Cool. And what's the thing about multiplying the root by 62.5%? Why do we do that? Alan, I heard you say something. I didn't hear what it was. Yeah, get your 10 pixels. Do you do that? Have you done that before?
I don't do it because, like you were saying, people have a tendency to switch their default font size, and it will really mess up a layout.
So do you ever set yours to 10 pixels, the root?
I usually set mine to 12.
12? Cool. I like hearing that. If you have, because I know you've got like a lot of industry experience. I come from the theory, just read it kind of experience. So chime in, man, when you have like that stuff.
I usually set mine to 12 just because, especially nowadays, web design is going hand in hand with print and other multimedia, and most of your print is all set at 12 font. And so it just makes it more compatible and more cross-platform, I guess.
Cool. 12. I like it. All right, so the next one is percent, and percent is relative to the parent. Just like M is relative to the parent, but percent is contextual. So here's that same example and how we would do it with percent. So I'll give you a minute just to sort of grok the code. And I've commented out identical ways of doing it. So all 3 of those lines 6, 7, and 8 are identical. And 12 and 13, you could use either one and get the same effect. I guess I could have had down here 2 rim also. Unless my parent happened to be, No, it could be the root. Yeah, so either 20 or 20 or 20. And I could get 20 off of the root. I could get 20 off of. If my parent's 20 and I do 2m, I'm now at 40, huh? That wouldn't work. I can't do this one. Yeah, it totally would work. I could do that one because I want 200%. This one doesn't work there because section is 200% of its parent. Percent goes to its parent. So I could do m. So I had it right the first time. Sorry. Code's that way. Here's 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 40 pixels. Because section's parent is the article. Article is 20 pixels. I could get 20 pixels with 2rem, 2m, or 200% in the article. That gives me 20 pixels. Now to get 40 pixels in the section, I could do 2m, give me 2 of my parents. 2 times 20 is 40. Or I could do 200%, give me 200% of my parent. So m and percent, same deal. For font. Same example, or same HTML, slightly different CSS. I don't know if that code's right, because I got 2m and I have 100%. I think that needs to be 1m. So anything in article is going to be 20 pixels, whether it's 2rem, 2m, or 200%. And anything in section is going to be 20 pixels, whether its font size is 100% or font size is 1m. Give me 1 of my parents, or 100% of my parents. Proof's in the pudding. I know you're like, well, run it. Now it's all 20. Because I was just asking for 100% instead of 200% for that inner one. Here's this one. CSS. And I could bring this up and you can see the HTML all at once. How's that? So my font is 10 pixels, 20 pixels. And the margin is 20 pixels. I could have done 1m or 100%. Ooh, would 100% work? Because there on line 11, my margin is 20 pixels, right? Is margin 20 pixels equal to margin 100%? Remember, percent is contextual. Margin's looking to, when you use percent with margin, see ya. When you use percent with margin, are you talking about font size or are you talking about width of the parent? Width of the parent. So here's with 1m, right? That's fine because that's just a margin of 20 pixels. Let's comment that out. Look at margin 100%. Way screwed up layout. All my text is just jammed right there on the edge. So percent versus m versus rem. Percent relative to the parent and contextual. Rem and m is relative to the parent and off the font, and rem is relative to the root and off the font. And then we have pixels. Pixels are absolute. So there's that same HTML and how we'd get there with pixels. So I could do font size 62.5% for HTML or font size 10 pixels. For article, I could do 2rem, 2em, or 20 pixels. For section, if I want it to be 20 pixels, I could do 1em or font size 20 pixels. Could I use percent there? Right, I could also use percent in these situations. So what would be the percent font size I'd do here to get 20 pixels? 200%. All right, so I could also do 200%. So font size 1em, I could also do is there some way I could use rem right here? Just for hoots and giggles and get 20 pixels? Yes, right? Because I just want it to be 2rem, which would be 2 times 10. Sorry, it's not a very hard question. I said it like it was challenging, but I thought it was going to be more interesting. So there's pixels. 2020. And let's leave this pixels. Pixels are in some ways easy because you just don't have to think about what's happening relative to stuff. Here's the same thing with pixels. Font size is 20 pixels and my margin between everything is 20 pixels. And then we have viewport width or viewport height. Oh, I wish I could find my keys. I'm jealous. Huh? You know where my keys are? You're kidding me.
I thought.
Dude, I have been missing my keys forever. That is so awesome.
Happy birthday.
Dude.
She gets an A, right?
Yes. I can't believe that.
Always ask a woman. We generally know where everything's at. Right.
You guys, I think, are more intelligent. Well, we all have multiple intelligences, but
Go, what are you looking for? And I usually find it.
sometimes I'll be like, where's the mustard? My wife's like, right there in front of your nose? No, not that bad, but
Can I say something for you?
thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Open registration for women tech makers is now open. It's wtm.gdgfresno.com. And also today's the first day if you want to try to get into Google I/O, and there is academic registration open. So I definitely would give it a try if I was any of you. So he can show you the site for that.
Okay, what's WTM?
wtm.gdgfresno.com.
That's a lot.
It is. Yeah,
Cool.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is awesome.
Yeah.
April 9th.
Bitwise. If you scroll down, you can see the people speaking. We have somebody from Google.
She's super supportive.
Super. So, there's some good people speaking. Okay?
Cool.
Thank you.
Are you gonna post that somewhere?
Am I going to post it? No. This one right here?
Okay, there. It's a little hard.
There you go. And later in the month, I'll be having the WTF.gdgfresno.com event where we look at things which just don't make sense in coding. We say WTF.
No, the modern family translation on that one. Why the face?
By the face. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's a good one too.
All right, I can't believe I found my keys. Rio told me where they were.
Were you getting into your house?
This is my work keys. This is like a month they've been gone. Like when I was sick, I left them here.
Well, it was like general keys.
This is just all my work keys. And there's a couple of keys in here which are like, I don't know what they go to, but they make it jingle more. That's so cool. All right, so the VW stuff, there's only 80%. So do you guys even want to see it? Same kind of stuff you've been seeing. I'll just briefly show the CSS. Right, font size 2VW. So it has nothing to do with this. It's just based off the width of my viewport. And so here's my viewport. My computer's tweaking. As I change the viewport, the font's changing. You like that, Alan?
Actually, I do.
80% browser support, though.
Yeah, sorry. Not enough.
Not enough. And you know, you can see another example here with this example, the paragraph example, where the margin and the font kind of work together. Sweet.
Can you set it to like a minimum on that?
Great question. So margin 2VW. I don't know how that'd work though.
Wouldn't you combine that with a media query
Sure, you can combine with media queries.
so that you could set it to where once it reached a certain viewport size, it would,
Switch.
yeah.
So the min and the max, I don't know if I don't have any examples of min and max, but MD and VW.
You could set the media query to where, like, say if it went below, say 300, then it kept a constant size rather than allowing it to continue to change. That would, so in other words, it would shrink, and once it got to 300, then the text would stop shrinking at that point. I think that would be the easiest way to do that.
But wouldn't that still affect your images? Or, I mean, would stop those from
There's a lot to put together.
Yeah,
All right, a lot of different pieces. Figure out how they all work together.
you have to test your code.
Minimum value between the height and width of the viewport. Vmin. I don't know, 2 Vmin. The minimum value is like, let's say it's so the minimum value means it's not going to get smaller than that. So let's say we don't want it smaller than 2, but min, what is it? Vmin. Vmin. We don't want it smaller than 2, and Vmin. Well, you know, it's still like, to me, that's the thing. It's relative to the viewport. So as I change the viewport size, that's still 2 of the viewport, right? So I don't quite understand vmin. You could use it like with an image. Make the image. You can see this is on the image selector. The height, 99 viewport height. Width, 99 viewport width. I tried Vmax there. Let's see what that does. Where's my image? So it's just always sort of sticking to the viewport. Obviously the aspect ratio is getting messed up. What happens if it's Vmax? So the max is 99. Same deal. What about if it was like, what happens if I shrink down? Nothing, same stuff. Did I hit refresh? Vmin. I don't know. That's what I do. It's a little bit of an existential thing, you know. Sit in my office, I'm just like tweak, tweak, weep, 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 tweak, tweak, weep, 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 weep. What happens? So good practice when you're building websites. Right there. I'll let you read it. So don't use fixed width. Don't say like this div is 900 pixels. Because then when you do and the web thing changes in size, that won't change. So say the div is 70% or 100%. And then as the viewport changes, well, okay, that div's changing. So you want things to be responsive. So at different sizes, they look good. There's different tools we've been learning. We learned about media queries, so we could just change the CSS and how we're formatting stuff, right? We learned about Flexbox. You know, and Flexbox allows things to stretch and flex and fit in there. So whether you do it with media queries and breakpoints or Flexbox, or you know, you're going to use relative units of measurement like percent or m or rem, you know, to get things to sort of like, oh, that div's 100% stretching, right? And then it hits a breakpoint, the layout shifts a little bit. So whatever you use, you just have to start using those tools to have things be responsive or flexible. And so, you know, here's an example of that div where, you know, the width is 100%, just so you can see that in action. And it looks good. You know, it just keeps, it's 100% no matter what size the screen is. So that's what you want to shoot for, however you get it. And you don't want to do it where it's like this, where the width is just 900 pixels, you know. And here's 900 pixels, which I've got a horizontal scroll bar there. Bad user experience. So that's what that's saying. Just make sure things are flexing and then hitting breakpoints. And a great example of that's what we're going to look at next. And we're going to see these common Flexbox design patterns where we're using media queries, right, to and things growing and flexing, however that's being achieved. We're using that to have a nice layout at all sizes. Maybe you want to, you know, you'd want that to be slightly different because full screen is pretty much what the design standard is now. Like, don't leave white space on either side, but have things like this, you know, where it's the whole screen's being used. I want to watch the videos.
Really sparse room.
Huh?
It was just a really sparse room. It was like a pair of shoes and a towel. Sorry.
No problem. So we'll see that in the next section. How many people got something good out of the units of measurement? Like, that's a good thing to sort of like, let's get down and make sure that we understand m's, rems, percents, pixels. Like, we use those, you know, and for a long time I didn't understand them. So it's like, I got to understand this stuff. Which ones do I want to use? Why? I'm just learning this stuff, as you know, too.